Thank you so much for having me. I'm trying to just share my screen. If
Oh yeah,
that's
one sec.
can we see the screen? Am I audible and is the screen visible? Hello?
Yeah, Nitin, you are audible and the screen is clearly visible. Please get
Awesome.
started.
Well, great to meet everyone. I really will try to go very quickly. And there are so many topics. Web3 digital assets is exciting because it's a new internet. So it's not a sector, it's not a space, it's a new internet. So in covering it in any depth in 15 minutes is impossible, and I will not try. What I think, given the audience is mostly investors, but my guess is almost all investors who are not exposed to Web3. What I'll try to do is just cover really a couple of quick topics. One is how we are looking at it, why we are excited, and where sort of things are in India. And secondly, I found it helpful to break down the jargon a little bit because there are so many things being thrown around: Web3, DAOs, NFTs, DeFi. And again, at a very superficial level, I'll try to try to describe how we look at what Web3 really is. And please do share questions as they come up. I'd like to keep it interactive if possible. So just to be clear, so we're one of the fastest growing venture platforms in the world. In India, we are focused on very early stage. So I want to first set the stage that Antler has a dedicated focus at pre-seed. We only invest as the first believer in founders. And so that's the role that we are trying to play for founders, is being the first institutional platform that backs them. Of course, many other stages are far more developed. I will skip my background, but the point that I would like to point out is that about 5 years ago, I went down this rabbit hole of blockchain, crypto, Web3, and was not getting Bitcoin in 2010 or 11 when I first heard about it. But what got me more excited as a venture capitalist was the technology, and not just sort of the trading and speculation part of it. And became the first VC in India to dedicatedly spend time on this. I created something called Encrypt, and today, fast forward, we are actually so bullish on it that we've publicly announced that we will deploy around 100 to 150 million in India at the early stage in the next 2 to 3 years. And a third of it we expect will go to Web3 and blockchain, if not more. Globally, we have invested in 20 startups. As Antler, I also lead our global Web3 effort. And in India, we have started to invest. We've done 3 investments so far. Of course, a huge topic here for anyone who's from the AIF industries: how do funds participate in this space given regulations and given the fact that the world is moving from equity to a new concept of tokens and digital assets. So maybe we'll spend a minute on that later. Across our team, we've invested in a number of prior investments as well. And as I was mentioning, for me personally, it's very heartening because in 2017, me and a few folks I got together, we were starting to build the ecosystem in Bangalore. We did events. We had 400 blockchain developers. We did delegations to Switzerland, Russia. I still advise Niti Aayog on some things, but fast forward to today, it's a world apart, right? So if anyone's not clear, where are we in India today? I cannot confirm these numbers because this really varies, but we are talking about 2 crore Indians have crypto exposure. If you look at the overlap between various exchanges, one exchange that reported numbers said 43 billion of trading volume in last year, which was 17 times higher than the year before. So this has become very real, right? And this was pre sort of some level of clarity. I know that taxation could work both positively or negatively for retail participation, but we are talking very big numbers that have been growing 10, 20 times year on year in the last couple of years. Some estimates say India is next to only Philippines in terms of per capita cryptocurrency usage adjusted for income. That's one way to look at it. VC investment really picked up last year. I think you can see for regulatory reasons a lot. There was basically this 4 or 5 year period when India was nowhere on the global map, and we had over 600 million of money coming in last year, largely in the growth rounds of exchanges. But now, of course, there's a lot more early stage activity that's beginning to happen. Of course, everyone has heard of Polygon, which is the real juggernaut built in India, and that is the kind of stuff that we personally find very interesting. Given the early stage focus and the technology focus. Polygon is an absolute blockbuster success right now. There are 7,000 projects worldwide which are developing on top of Polygon. Close to 1 billion transactions, 3 million monthly active users, and $4 billion locked in various projects on top of the Polygon. So it's not just a technology or a company, it's become an ecosystem itself. And that's why you see the valuation announcement this week. All of this being said, we are still very early. Only this is a crude way of looking at it. Web3 is not a different language, programming language wise, but if you look at people who are working in Web3 as developers, we still have roughly 18,000 people. Maybe might be about 25, 30,000 by now, let's say. This is a little bit old. But we are still talking about so much of a migration that has to happen from developers, programmers who've been working on Web 2 to come to Web 3. And a true $1 trillion asset class has been created based on the work that these initial few thousand Web3 developers have done. So this is what, from our perspective, building tooling in India for the global blockchain ecosystem is very exciting. The good thing about investing in startups in this space is they're global from day one, most of them. You may have something which is an exchange that's meant for the local market. Of course, there can be other B2B types of SaaS, etc. platforms also. But the more interesting things are protocol projects or applications, which by definition are global on day one. So that's the good part. The bad part is they're global on day one. So, there is nothing like I'm the best team in India for this particular thing, right? Because you are competing with everything else in the world. So the benchmark is very, very high. That still, given that talent and developer talent is really the one of the key strengths of the ecosystem in India, we think that there are hundreds and hundreds of amazing projects to be built in the next few years. And that's why we made this public commitment to make this our number one priority for this fund. I'll spend a few minutes just to give a very quick snapshot of this space. So, Bitcoin, etc., is been around since 2008. But before that, obviously people have been working on cryptography, electronic finance, and fintech, right? Fintech's not new. The difference is DeFi or Bitcoin is not, you could say fintech is incremental. You're still using the same banking rails versus the world of DeFi says, why do we need those banking rails? Why don't we create a new system altogether? So it's very disruptive in that sense. 2008 Bitcoin white paper created the idea that you could create decentralized money. On top of that, people started to ask, what other things could you decentralize? In 2014, Ethereum launched and said you have a new language and a new smart contract framework. So you can develop many types of applications which will not need a centralized party. So that took off. And some of you might remember there was a big boom in 2016-17 with ICOs, where people started to raise money on Ethereum without going through the typical venture capital process. So in a way, the first application of Ethereum was really, how do you raise money? And the venture capital became the first killer app. Then for 2 or 3 years, there was a lull, but great things are built during those kinds of periods, right? So we had a lot of people starting to say, Bitcoin is just money. But finance is what all, right? Money, paying payments of that money, banking, lending, insurance, investing, derivatives, right? What if you could create decentralized versions of each of this? So that's why there's been so much activity in what's called DeFi, right? And then last year, we went from sort of all of this finance activity to something which became more consumer, mass awareness on the consumer level with NFTs, because people had been asking, all of crypto was just, the asset side and buying other crypto. How does the average person understand them? And so NFTs caught the attention of, a very large number of people. And part of it was COVID, part of it was asset inflation across the board. Part of it was these apps became more mature. And then, suddenly you have a much higher level of exposure to the asset class now. So I will sum up by saying, we are talking about the reason that I and we are as at Antler are very exciting is we call it, it's a new internet and a new financial system happening in parallel. And they will actually, for the first time, they are actually meshing. So assets can be digital, right? I call the new internet part of it Web3. I call the new financial part of it DeFi. And you could call it, on whatever is happening on the DeFi side, starting from Bitcoin all the way to things like Uniswap and Compound globally. And there are some amazing projects coming out of India as well, is really the asset side. And now the more interesting things in the next few years are going to be both more and more maturing on the DeFi side, more institutions coming in perhaps, but also a completely new internet with Web3, right? Which is the application side, as we call it. I think all of us have heard about and are experienced that, the current internet, which is Web 2, as it's called, is broken in many ways. There's too much power with Google and Facebook or Amazon. There are many risks ranging from censorship to central points of failure to monopolies. We create the data, but we never get the value. The data is used by these companies to create value. And so a lot of smart people in the world believe that we are ready for all of this to be, disrupted. So what happens in a Web3 framework is that you build the infrastructure in a decentralized way. I will skip a lot of this because of our shortage of time, but think of it this way. You've got crypto today. If 4 other things happen, then you have a new internet. So one is the identity, right? Which is today, if you go and log into something, you use Google or Facebook most likely, including your work email, etc. So we have federated our identity to these players. But a lot of startups are working on areas like self-sovereign identity, where what will happen is you will have one wallet, one identity, and that will be your gateway to all sorts of apps, and the data will never leave without your permission. Next could be decentralized infrastructure. So the internet is just basically a combination of storage, computing capacity, delivery of content, all of this, right? And today we have Google or Dropbox or AWS, again, very centralized parties. Could you have decentralization here? So in India, we have seen startups which are working on this as well. Then you have the idea of Daos. DAOs are disruptive because they challenge the notion of a company itself. Why do, this is so crazy for those of us who have grown up with Wall Street or Dalal Street and finance in India. But DAOs are asking, why do you need limited liability companies, right? Can people get together online, trust each other because of the blockchain and smart contracts, and create new ways of collaborating, buying assets? So DAOs can, for example, I may not know many of you, but we could get together on a DAO and bid for an asset together. We may not be able to own a certain asset, but we can own fractions of an asset. Or we could do other things, including developers, for example, programmers could get together and build a new project. These things were not possible earlier, but because of blockchain and cryptography, it solves for trust. So if you can trust a stranger because you're trusting code, you can participate in these kinds of things. And then finally, NFTs, which everyone has heard of. And today it's a lot of fluff and entertainment, right? You've heard of people buying JPEGs for a lot of money. You also may have seen yesterday, I saw a news around somebody used an NFT to actually as collateral to get $1 million loan. So these crazy new things are happening. And the idea is that while some of it is fluff and hype, if you look beneath the surface, the point is that assets can be digital, right? So if you have, there is no reason why something digital cannot be unique, or when you can prove ownership, that somebody might not find value in it. But more interestingly, gaming and art and music are areas where we've seen, including in India, new startups asking the question, why does the music value chain in India work a certain way? Can we do that differently? And so on and so forth. I think I'll pause because we might be running out of time, but last point I'll make is, there's also this thing thrown around called the Metaverse. So you might be wondering what that is. So like I said, I call crypto plus these 4 things as Web3. Now you take all of this and look at other things that are happening, like virtual reality, etc. And when you add those things which are happening in parallel, then there is a thing called Wright's law, which predicts that by about 2030, these devices, virtual reality devices, will become very cheap. Today, they're about $200, the Facebook Oculus. But very soon, in a few years, it might be that millions and millions of people, including large numbers of Gen Zs in India, younger folks, millennials, would be working, playing games, interacting in a virtual environment. right? And when that happens, that's when you come close to what's called the metaverse. So I will pause there. I know we are short on time. Maybe I can just, if there are any questions, I can go into them.